What happens when Hollywood's most stoic action star clashes with late night's most unfiltered provocateur? When Harrison Ford, the legend behind some of cinema's most iconic roles, sat down for what was supposed to be a routine late-night interview. No one expected fireworks, but what unfolded on Jimmy Kimmel Live quickly spiraled from light banter into one of the most uncomfortable, explosive interviews in late-night history. Before we get into the details, make sure to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Which celebrity confrontation do you want us to break down next? Now back to the firestorm. The night began like any other in Tinseltown. The buzz around the studio lot was electric as Harrison Ford arrived, fresh off a press tour for his newest film. Wearing a relaxed blazer and that trademark half-grin, he exuded the kind of effortless, cool only decades in the spotlight can forge. But while Ford expected the usual promotional chat, Jimmy Kimmel had something else in mind. And it wasn't just laughs. As Ford took his seat, offering a polite nod to the crowd, Kimmel wasted no time. The jokes started playfully enough, poking fun at Ford's long history of dodging death on movie sets. But within minutes, the conversation took a darker turn. "I was reading an old interview," Kimmel began with a glint in his eye. "Apparently, you once said Han Solo should have died in Empire Strikes Back because," and I quote, "the character had no growth left and was becoming a burden to the story." The room shifted. A low murmur rippled through the crowd. Ford's smile faltered for just a moment. "That quote was taken out of context," Ford said carefully, his tone controlled. "I was speaking with a film student about narrative arcs. It wasn't some grand declaration." Kimmel wasn't buying it. "But that's the thing, Harrison. You've played some of the most beloved characters in cinema. Han Solo, Indiana Jones, Rick Deckard. And yet, there's a trail of interviews where you seem to reject or belittle those very roles." Ford's jaw clenched. The audience was silent now, watching as Kimmel pressed harder. "We've got you on record calling Indiana Jones repetitive, Han Solo flat, and Deckard a character you didn't understand. Doesn't that sound like someone who resents the legacy he built?" Ford shifted in his chair, gripping the armrests, his voice low and steady. "As an actor, it's my job to interrogate the material. That doesn't mean I don't respect the fans or the films. But we evolve. My thoughts change over time." But Jimmy wasn't letting go. "Do they, though? Because I also dug up a 1997 interview where you called the blockbuster industry, and I quote, a machine churning out mediocrity for the masses. You starred in those blockbusters, Harrison. You helped build that machine. So were you. Talking about the industry. Or yourself?" Ford's expression hardened. His voice dropped into that unmistakable razor-sharp whisper audiences have heard in countless thrillers. "Careful, Jimmy." It was no longer entertainment. It was a battle of dignity versus provocation, and the audience could feel it. Harrison Ford. "Jimmy, I came here to talk about my new film, not to relitigate every interview I've given over the past 4 decades. But Kimmel, sensing he had the upper hand, and a captivated audience watching this slow-motion train wreck, pressed on. Jimmy Kimmel. "I'm just trying to understand the disconnect here, Harrison. On one hand, you've made hundreds of millions playing these characters you seem to have complicated feelings about. On the other, you've spent years in interviews subtly criticizing the very roles that made you famous." Ford's knuckles whitened as he gripped his chair tightly. Ford. "You know what, Jimmy? I think there's been a misunderstanding about what kind of interview this was going to be." Kimmel, voice rising. This is exactly the kind of interview it was always going to be. You come on these shows, give the same rehearsed answers about craft and process, but you never actually engage with the reality of your career. You never acknowledge the contradiction. Ford, dangerously quiet. What contradiction? Kimmel. The contradiction of being one of the biggest movie stars in the world, while acting like you're above the very thing that made you a movie star. The studio grew so quiet you could hear the cameras whirring. Ford stared at Kimmel for a long beat. Anyone watching could see the exact moment his legendary patience snapped. Ford, cutting through the silence like a knife. You want to talk? About contradictions, Jimmy? Let's talk about contradictions. You make your living mocking people who are out there creating something, taking risks, putting themselves on the line. What exactly have you created besides a platform to tear others down? Kimmel's smug grin faltered for a split second. Then he recovered quickly. Kimmel. I create entertainment, Harrison. Comedy. I make people laugh. Ford leaned in, intensity blazing. Ford. From where I'm sitting, it looks like you make people laugh at others, not with them. There's a difference between comedy and cruelty, and you seem to have trouble telling them apart. The audience was riveted. This wasn't the measured, diplomatic Harrison Ford they knew. This was raw, unfiltered anger from a man who'd clearly reached his limit. Kimmel, scoffing nervously. Oh, come on. You're one of Hollywood's most successful actors. You really think a few jokes are going to hurt your feelings? Ford. This isn't about jokes, Jimmy. It's about respect. And you clearly don't have any. Kimmel's voice cracked slightly. Kimmel, you want to talk about respect? You've spent your career acting like you're too good for the roles that made you famous. Like you're some serious dramatic actor who got stuck doing adventure movies. Meanwhile, millions love those characters, and you treat them like they're beneath you. Ford's eyes blazed. Ford. I have never treated the fans with anything but gratitude and respect. But there's a difference between respecting the fans and pretending every creative decision was perfect, that every script was Shakespeare, every movie a masterpiece. Kimmel, voice shrill. You can't have it both ways. You can't take the paycheck and the fame, then spend decades undermining the very thing that gave it to you. Ford snapping. I'm not undermining anything. I'm being honest about the creative process, treating the audience like adults who can handle the fact that making movies is complicated, that actors sometimes disagree with directors, that not every moment on set is magical. Kimmel, nastier now, all pretense gone. You go beyond that. You've made it clear in dozens of interviews that you think these blockbuster movies are beneath your artistic integrity, Ford. Show me one interview where I said that. Kimmel. I don't need to. Everyone watching knows exactly what I mean. The eye rolls when Star Wars is mentioned. The visible discomfort talking about Indiana Jones. The way you light up only when discussing your smaller, serious films. Ford was on his feet, towering over Kimmel's desk. Ford. You know what your problem is, Jimmy. You think you understand people based on edited clips and out-of-context quotes. You think you can reduce 40 years of someone's career to a few sound bites that fit your narrative. Kimmel, standing his ground. I think I understand when someone is being fake. You've been fake for decades. Fake enthusiasm. Fake gratitude. Fake humility. Ford's voice dropped again. Dangerously quiet. Ford. You want to know what's fake? This whole setup. You invite me here under false pretenses, ambush me with gotcha questions, then act like I'm the problem when I don't play along with your little game. The audience was silent, watching this unprecedented confrontation escalate beyond any late-night precedent. Producers frantically gestured from the wings, but neither man backed down. Kimmel. It's not a game, Harrison. It's called accountability. You're a public figure who's made hundreds of millions off the public's goodwill. And you've spent years showing contempt for the very people who made you rich and famous. Ford, voice rising. Contempt? You want to see contempt? This, what you're doing right now, twisting someone's words, attacking their character, trying to humiliate them on national television for your own entertainment, that's contempt. Kimmel. I'm asking legitimate questions about contradictions in your public statements. Ford. No, you're not. You're being a bully. Ford. You're using your platform to attack someone who can't fight back on equal terms. Because this is your show, your audience, your rules. Kimmel's face flushed, his carefully constructed TV persona slipping away. Kimmel. If you can't handle tough questions, maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews. Ford laughed bitterly. Ford. These aren't tough questions, Jimmy. They're cheap shots designed to make you look clever at my expense. A tough question would be about craft, about choices, about the work itself. This is just tabloid garbage masquerading as journalism. Ford, voice rising. Everything I've brought up is from your own interviews, your own words, taken out of context, edited for maximum controversy, presented in the worst possible light. That's not journalism. That's character assassination. The tension in the studio was electric. Kimmel's bandleader stared in shock. The audience fell completely silent. Panic crept over the production staff's faces. Kimmel, venomous. You know what, Harrison? I think you're angry because someone finally called you out on your act. The humble movie star. The Ashucks Midwestern guy who just happened to become famous. It's all calculated, isn't it? Ford held Kimmel's gaze. Deadly calm. Ford. You really want to do this, Jimmy? Make it personal? Fine. Let's make it personal. The words hung heavy like a loaded gun. Ford's eyes were cold steel. For the first time, Kimmel looked genuinely uncomfortable. Ford. You want to talk about calculated? Let's talk about your career. You started as a radio shock jock, making prank calls for laughs. Then you moved to TV, building your entire brand on humiliating celebrities and ordinary people alike. The Man Show, where you objectified women for cheap laughs. Jimmy Kimmel Live, where you've spent 2 decades perfecting the ambush interview. Kimmel's face reddened by the second. Ford. That's completely different, is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've made a fortune, being cruel to people who can't fight back. Kimmel. At least when I play a character, I'm trying to entertain people. Ford. When you attack people, you're just feeding off their discomfort for your own benefit. Kimmel. I don't attack people. I ask hard questions. Ford, dripping with contempt. Hard questions? Jimmy, I've been asked hard questions, interviewed by real journalists who understand the craft, who dig deep into the work. What you do isn't journalism. It's voyeurism. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't a meltdown. It was 2 entertainment titans tearing into each other live. Ford, voice gaining momentum. You sit there accusing me of being fake, putting on an act. But your entire career is an act. The friendly late-night host, the self-deprecating humor, the everyman persona. It's all carefully crafted to hide the fact that you're just a bully with a platform. Kimmel, snapping. That's enough. Ford was just getting started. Ford. No, Jimmy. It's not enough. You want to psychoanalyze my relationship with my career? Fine, let's psychoanalyze yours. You've spent your entire adult life making fun of other people because you're fundamentally insecure about your own lack of talent, Ford. You can't create anything original, so you tear down those who can. I create comedy every night. You create cruelty every night. There's a difference, Ford. Real comedy comes from truth, from humanity, from finding the absurd in everyday life. What you do is find people's vulnerabilities and exploit them for laughs. That's not comedy. That's sadism. Kimmel visibly shook. His polished TV mask was shattered. Ford. You want to know what you're really defending, Jimmy? Let's talk about your greatest hits. The time you mocked that kid with the speech impediment. The way you ridiculed that actress for crying during her divorce. The countless moments you've taken someone's worst pain and turned it into a punchline. That's your legacy. Not entertainment, Kimmel. Those were comedy bits. They were supposed to be funny. Ford. Cold. Funny? To who? The people you humiliated? Or just to you and your audience of enablers? The studio fell into a heavy silence, broken only by their voices. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Ford. Here's what's truly pathetic. You invited me here tonight, not to have a conversation or to learn about my work or process. No, you brought me here because you thought you could score points by tearing down someone who's actually accomplished something in their life. Ford, voice hard. I've accomplished plenty. What exactly have you done, Jimmy? You've gotten rich making others uncomfortable, built your career on their pain and embarrassment. When you're gone, when this show is canceled and forgotten, what will you have actually contributed? What meaningful creation will be your legacy? Kimmel clenched his fists, face tightening. Ford. I've entertained millions. You've fed millions' worst instincts. You've normalized cruelty and called it entertainment. You taught a generation that it's okay to mock and humiliate people, as long as you're funny while doing it. That's not true, is it? Ford. Look around, Jimmy. Look at the world you've helped create. A world where everyone thinks they're a comedian, where people's pain is fair game for jokes, and basic decency is seen as weakness. You didn't build that world alone, but you've certainly played your part. Ford stepped closer to Kimmel's desk, voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Ford, here's the real tragedy. You are intelligent, you do have talent, but you wasted it on cheap, exploitative garbage, because that's easier than trying to create something meaningful. Kimmel, shaking. I don't have to listen to this. Ford, no, you don't. But your audience does. They deserve to know who they're really supporting every night. Someone who, behind the jokes and celebrity guests, fundamentally doesn't respect them or anyone else. Kimmel was breathing heavily. Composure shattered. Kimmel, you have no right to judge me. Ford, I have every right. You started this. You brought me here under false pretenses. You ambushed me with attacks on my character and career, all with that smug little smile, like you were doing the world a favor, Odd. Well, congratulations. You got your confrontation. How does it feel? The two men stared across the desk, decades of Hollywood diplomacy stripped away. This was raw, unfiltered animosity. Two men at their breaking point. Kimmel, voice shaking with rage. You can't stand that someone finally called you out. You've been treated like royalty for so long. You forgot what it means to be challenged. Ford laughed bitterly. Ford, Jimmy, I've been challenged by directors, critics, audiences, by the work itself, by real artists who demanded excellence and cared about something more than just a reaction. What you're doing isn't a challenge. It's an insult. Maybe you need to be insulted. Maybe you need to grow up. Kimmel's face turned pale, then red, then pale again. Ford. I'm running one of the most successful shows on TV, Ford. Success isn't maturity. A child can be successful throwing tantrums. That doesn't make them an adult. Kimmel slammed, his hand down, making his coffee mug jump. Kimmel. Get out! Just get out! Ford stared for a long moment, then straightened his jacket. Ford. You know what, Jimmy? I think I will. Turning to the stunned audience, his voice calm and dignified. Ford. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize you had to witness this. You came here for entertainment, and instead, you saw what happens when someone mistakes cruelty for comedy. He turned, back to Kimmel, one last time. Ford. Jimmy, I hope someday you figure out the difference between being funny and being mean. For your sake, and for everyone who has to deal with you. With that, Harrison Ford walked off the Jimmy Kimmel Live stage, leaving behind one of the most explosive confrontations in late-night history. The audience sat in stunned silence. Kimmel stood behind his desk, his career potentially in ruins. All because he thought he could take down a legend and forgot. Legends don't go down without a fight. The cameras kept rolling as Ford disappeared into the wings, capturing every moment of Kimmel's humiliation. In trying to expose Ford's contradictions, Kimmel had instead exposed his own ugly truth. Behind the charm and jokes was someone who built a career on others' pain, and when confronted, had nothing left but rage.